Are you thinking about starting or nourishing a career in menstrual cycle health? Then consider joining our 9-month online holistic hormone and cycle coaching certification training. In this training, you get science-backed and evidence-based education, as well as teachings about the somatic aspects of having a menstrual cycle, functional nutrition, hormone testing, and much, much more. We will have incredible live group sessions, and you will get guidance from me. There will also be amazing guest teaching lectures from experts in the field, and at the end you will receive an official certificate of completion that is globally recognized. As a listener of the Planting Seeds podcast, you receive an additional €100 off when you use the code PODCAST when you sign up. Click on the link in the show notes to learn more. This episode really sparked joy in my heart. I'll be speaking with Kyra de Vreeze, who is a naturopath since 2003, and we spoke about all things regenerative living, connecting to ourselves and the earth, connecting to our locality and honoring foods that are in season, and much, much more. And Kyra shares her very, very inspiring story as to how she got to the point that she wants to be sharing with the world about the importance of living according to the seasons, living in connection to nature, and how that can really help us feel in connection with ourselves and our communities. And Kyra and I have been knowing each other for quite a long time. Like, we have met when I was working at a yoga studio in the Netherlands, and we've always been in each other's orbit and following each other's work and being inspired by one another. And I am so grateful that she took the time to come on here today and share her wisdom with us. Hello, friends. My name is Iris Josephina. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Planting Seeds podcast. On the Planting Seeds podcast, we explore how we can cultivate a more gentle relationship with our cyclical bodies, the earth, each other, and the world around us through using our senses, science, the subtle, and the sacred. On Planting Seeds, we talk about all those topics you've always wanted to talk about. We are shamelessly opening up the conversations that we all so desperately need to settle in our precious bodies and relate to each other in a more open, truthful, and empowered way. I'm so glad you're here today. Welcome to the podcast, Kyra. How are you today?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm well. I've slept 11 hours, so I'm very rested. So thank you.
Beautiful. So we're here today, and we're going to be diving into some topics that you are very passionate about and that I really admire you for. But before we fully dive in, I'd love to ask you, what is your story and your background, and how did you get there?
Yeah, so my background has, I believe, everything to do with where I am today and, what I share. And so I was born on a Caribbean island called Curaçao, which is a Dutch colony. And my parents are both from there. We're both born there as well. And my father built us our own home on a piece of land as far away from the capital as can be. I mean, it's a small island, but it was on the other side of the island on a piece of land. He built a mostly off-grid home. We didn't have electricity other than a windmill and an attached battery. So I think probably one electric lamp in the home, and we had a propane fridge and a propane stove. We didn't have a washing machine, so the washing had to be done by hand or in town. We didn't have TV, no computers. We didn't have warm water, only cold water from the tap, which meant that because Curaçao is a tropical island, that during the day the water in the pipes would heat up, and if you would go say around 6 o'clock in the afternoon and take a shower, the water would be extremely hot. And in the morning, when you would want a warm shower, the water would be cold.
Oh,
So, and because Curacao is on the equator, the sun would set approximately at 7 o'clock every evening. And then we would see a full starry sky. So I grew up with dark nights watching, the universe, the stars, the planets. And during the day, I was off in the garden by myself, playing with rocks and stones. Our home didn't have any windows, so the wind would blow through the house as an air conditioning, and I would always be in touch with the elements. There was no barrier between me and the earth, bare feet on the ground always. And when I was about 5 years old, we moved, me, my mom, and my brother, we moved to Holland, to a place called Zoetermeer, which is a town created in the 70s, I think, from concrete. It was a concrete jungle. It was totally opposite from what I was used to. And yeah, so this had this, like the first 7 years, first 5, like mostly off grid, totally in touch with greenery and with the elements, and then moving in an apartment 4 stories high, off the floor, off the ground, feet off the ground. Yeah, surrounded by concrete. Yeah, made a huge impact on me, and created a foundation for the rest of my life. So when I was 8 years old, I decided I wanted to become a herbal doctor. And yeah, and I didn't know any other term, any other word for it. I just called it an herbal doctor because I thought it has everything to do with nature and with healing, and that's what I want to do. So, of course, when you are a teenager, you want to be something more fancy, like a fashion designer or an artist or something like that. So I had a temporary phase where I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. And then at age 18, decided that definitely I wanted to be an herbal doctor. But I now had an exact term, an exact word for it, which was a naturopath. So I did my studies to become a naturopath starting at 18, and I graduated when I was 23. And yes, been a naturopath now for 20 years. So yes, learned a lot of things in between, and here we are.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And how beautiful, what a privilege, actually, how you got to grow up until age 5. I think there is not many children who can say that they have lived like that in the Netherlands. Wasn't it like really hard for you as a child to move from that kind of freedom to be so confined in like an apartment?
Yeah, so of course, when you're a child, you just adapt. So at that time, I went on with my life and did my things, and always was attracted to outdoor play and herbs, and to be in some way in touch with the earth and nature. But I'm looking backward, looking back, I obviously I can see that it was hugely impactful for me. And for example, I during a period in my life when we moved there, I was very anxious. I was afraid of everything, which is totally logical when you look at the huge difference. That one space, which was, totally wrapped and, surrounded by the elements, and then move all, halfway across the world into such a different place. So it was more, I think, the radical difference than it was necessarily just that it was so much concrete. So it definitely had a huge impact.
Yeah, can imagine. And now, as a naturopath and all the other things that you did, You share a lot about how you live regeneratively. And from the story we just heard, that's a very logical thing for you because that's how your foundation was created. And I'm curious whether you can tell us, what does it mean to you to live regeneratively, and how did you know that this was the way for you, even after living, in a concrete jungle in an entirely different life than you were used to?
Yeah, so obviously I have a reference point of two very different places. One, urban environment, and then one very rural and remote. And I believe that this difference, because I experienced it and because I then did my naturopathic education and started looking at health and the impact of just what makes one healthy, that after 20 years of actually talking to people and observing my own life, I came to this conclusion that most of our ailments, of our what we call diseases, are actually founded in this disconnect from our nature and from the laws that nature provides us with. And that whenever we are disconnected from it, from nature, from earth, from truth, from divine law, from biology, which is all the same thing, I believe, whenever we are disconnected from this, the consequences usually that it starts to materialize as an ailment or disease. It has a consequence. It cannot be without consequence. And I actually feel when I observe the world around me that a lot of, that we have forgotten or been severed from this connection with earth, this deep connection with earth and with our nature. And that when we start to remember and we start to reconnect and we start to re-embody nature and truth and biology and our divine law, we get to find the cure, the medicine for what ails us. And I mean, it's very obvious that how things are run right now is not really the ultimate way of living, of healing, of coexisting. And so to live regeneratively to me means that regeneration means that you actually end up with a surplus, with more than what you have now. So sustainability means you sustain what is present. Well, I'm sure that most of the people that we speak to that are come to the conclusion that we don't want to sustain what we have now because it's not, ultimately healing to most people on Earth or Earth itself. So to regenerate means to have a surplus, to have more life, more abundance, more health, more of that surplus. So to regenerate, to thrive, to flourish, to be well, this is what to live regeneratively actually means. It is living according to the laws of nature, in alignment with earth, with her truth. And when we do so, we can thrive as human beings and we can regenerate and find abundance. So this is how I came to this way of life and what it means to me.
Yeah, beautiful. I so much agree with you. And I also feel that, as you say, how the world is today and how we go about our day, like the day-to-day things that we do, like our shopping, where we get our food, even that is not regeneratively done because most of us don't get the nourishment that they need from that. And that actually brings me to my next question, which is the importance of shopping locally and getting what we need, or just taking as much as we need in our local area. and the impact that has on us, but also on the earth. Could you share your views on that? Because I know that you share a lot about, supporting your local people and your local community, and also taking things that are very close to home. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So when I speak of actually shopping locally, I am actually talking about living locally and living in alignment with here and with now. And actually, when you start to observe earth and nature, you quickly learn that there's one important law, which is earth provides whatever is needed right now and right here. So there's actually this law of seasonality and of locality, which means that humans have always lived in close contact with their locale. I mean, it's only been a very short time that we've been able to travel across the world or transport our food across the world. We've always, and all other animals, and we as conscious animals and beings, have always been in reciprocity with Earth, receiving whatever she gives at this specific moment for us to nourish us at this specific moment, which is here and now. So, and there is a huge amount of wisdom in this, where Earth actually synchronizes us by giving us the food that is growing here and now, synchronizing us with the season, with our place. So wherever we are anchored in that place, and we are anchored at that specific time in place. And there's also this part where we have, living on this earth, we have the sun rise in the morning and the sun set in the evening. And also, depending on where we are, the sun rises later and sets earlier, depending on the season. And this is all meticulously intertwined with our well-being. So our body functions in a way where we get to sense constantly the light present. So not only if it is sunny or overcast, but what part of the day it is according to the light that enters our eyes and skin, and the height of the sun. So in the winter, it doesn't go very high up in the sky. So our body, without us consciously knowing this, senses this and knows it is this part of the year. It is this part of the day. And we are evolved to then eat food that is also grown at that specific moment, which is also in alignment with that, I call it divine timing, that clockwork. And when we eat that food, we can actually absorb it, we can digest it, we can use it, we can actually welcome its energy, because food is, if you look at it in a very basic way, it's energy materialized. It is certain type of energy, certain type of information, and it is formed and informed by light. So this, notion has a huge impact, because then everything that we eat is information that we ingest that informs our body to function in a way which is either optimal or less optimal. And when you look at eating locally and seasonally, it has everything to do with living in alignment with what the laws of earth, of nature, and to know that our bodies are actually in need of nutrition that is grown here and now to be able to function in the most abundantly thriving way possible. Of course, there are many other ways of, for example, when you have a farmer close to you who provides that nutrition. You are in contact with an actual person growing your actual food, which makes a huge difference, as well as the food from the local farm is grown very close to you, grown under the same sun as you have been grown under. And so this creates connection. This creates connection with the farmer, connection with the land, connection with the time, connection with your place in the world, connection with your food. And so it is a constant, like a mantra, a constant affirmation of like reconnection, connection, connection, connection. And it is only through connection that one is able to thrive and to flourish and to be well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I would like to share the imagery that came up for me when you were sharing all of this. So when you speak about the locality of food, I saw this image of us as like ancient people, like we would move from locality to locality to be with the food that is most richest available in that place, like our ancient ancestors. And then we learned to settle in one place and be in communion with the soil and care for her, if you will. That was the first image that came. And then when you were speaking of like being in touch with your locality, I thought about an interview I once heard with Sophie Strand, and she said like it's so important to be in touch with your locality because it is literally impossible to know everything in the radius of 5 kilometers from your house. Like in your entire life, you will not be able to know every grain of sand, every strand of grass. Like there is so much to discover in this 5-kilometer radius, and it is enough. Like there is so much abundance to discover that you won't have enough time in your entire life to even discover all of that. And then when you mentioned the energy in the food, I really saw all these foods coming from so far away and then imagining how tired traveling is for humans. And then I was like, how tiring must it be for our food to, be so far away from their locality and then land in an entirely different place energetically, and then having to be ingested there. Like I felt like this feeling of like, oh, these like poor fruities and vegetables so far away from home,
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense to honor what is available locally. And then, we haven't even spoken about mass agriculture and the soil being depleted from nutrients and then less nutrients landing in our bellies, which is a totally different story. But obviously the preservation of nutrients will happen more easily the less your food has to travel, because then nutrients are maintained better, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So there's a wisdom. I mean, Earth does nothing randomly. So there's a total wisdom in how things are shaped and how we've, lived always. And so one of the things that is incredibly important is that Earth never does anything randomly. Everything has a purpose and a reason. And she doesn't do chaotic. It is very systematic and structured and tailored. And so to sometimes believe that as very intelligent and modern people, we are able to reinvent the wheel and do things completely opposite than what she presents us with, and our nature tells us is very unintelligent and obviously has consequences. So, but yeah, it is our tendency to reinvent the wheel, to try to make things work more efficiently. But I believe that when we integrate our intelligence with the body, the embodied wisdom of the earth and all of the wisdom that is also, in our bodies, because it is there. We have perhaps temporarily forgotten these laws, the laws of nature, and how to live in harmony with Earth. We have perhaps temporarily forgotten it, but it's still in our DNA, it's in our system, it's in our bodies. That wisdom is there, and it just needs to be reignited.
Yeah, I completely hear you and see that. And I'm sometimes just appalled by the arrogance of humanity. Like, oh, we can manipulate everything. We can manipulate the earth in such a way that it, works in our benefit. But it's such an arrogant, disrespectful way to go about the source of your existence, The earth is literally providing us with energy to survive. And then sometimes, when I see what happens, my heart is just like, how can we be so, like you mentioned earlier, so unintelligent? There is this arrogance over it.
Yeah, I had a moving conversation with my eldest daughter yesterday. She came home from school from a field trip, and she said, they discussed all the ways that you can save the earth. So I had a conversation with her yesterday, and I said, do we really need to save the earth? Or do we need to save ourselves and earth will be fine? The conversation went on. But I really, what came up most potently is that when we are not here as humans, Earth will, she will be fine. She will thrive and she will do her thing. This is what Earth does. She always creates more abundance. Everything, flourishes and becomes more excellent. This is just the way nature constantly shows us how she does things. And if we realign with Earth and nature, we can, jump on that bandwagon and just excel with her and thrive with her. Yeah, actually, we have to choose to want to save ourselves, humanity, and ourselves individually by, realigning with the rules, with the laws of nature, with Earth, with being reconnected with her and with everything around us. And so the question to me isn't really how can we save the Earth, but how can we save ourselves?
That's really powerful. And it also makes me think, that they instill our children with these kinds of beliefs that we apparently need to save the planet, which then puts the attention away from ourselves, while that's where the change actually needs to happen. Yeah. So interesting. And a little bit concerning as well.
Yeah.
At least to me.
Yeah, because it puts a huge amount of pressure on young people to save the earth is too big of a concept for an adult to even grasp, let alone a developing child. So I believe also because, huge amounts of, actually when I look at 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds, the amount of anxiety that they actually experience in their daily life is ridiculously high. And when you look at the narratives that are being fed is we are, the humanity is a plague on the earth and we're ruining everything and we have to reduce our emissions. And what you're actually saying is you're not allowed to be here, to take your space. You're bad, you're a pest. And this messaging that we're actually sending with probably good intentions, because the intention is, of course, that we all want a thriving planet. But sometimes the narratives that are put out there are so destructive. And so we have to flip the whole story and actually look at how we as individuals, as like tiny humans, but very, very powerful beings, can impact our own lives by being reconnected, by remembering our place, our sense of belonging, our right to be here, and also our incredible ability to create abundance and flourishment. And this is what humans are able to do. This is what we can do. But the narrative right now is totally different, that we are destructive, that we are sinful, and that we have to repent, and we have to change that story.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and place ourselves back into the natural order of things, because by creating this story, we actually put ourselves outside of it, which then disconnects even more. We're like living up in our heads into these narratives, and then we try to solve all the problems on earth with our logic, rational minds, which then connects us even more from the body and how it interacts. So yeah, I totally agree with you that we need to flip this story. When we are speaking of, interacting with the earth and allowing the abundance to arise, there is also this concept of, okay, when we take something from nature, something that it gives to us, there is also an importance of using as much as possible from the items that we use. And I remember that one time you shared about avocados and that you don't waste anything of them. And of course, there is this whole movement right now that focuses on, okay, when we use an animal, we need to do it mouth to tail and we cannot waste anything. Could you speak to that and the importance of that?
Yeah, I call this honoring energy. So it's just I like words, so I always I always have to attach words to my actions, basically. And I call this honoring energy because basically everything is energy. So you can, of course, use it linear, and so something comes into being, and then at the end you throw it away. But this is not how nature does things. Nothing is ever thrown away, in the sense that it always has a purpose. So there's no waste when it comes to, what Earth shows us and nature shows us. There's no waste. So everything always goes back into a loop and is of benefit to someone or something else. So when I, go about my daily life, I try to embody this principle as well, and to practice it in very practical and mundane ways. So one of them, we rarely buy avocados, but when we do, we use I and sometimes my daughters, we dry the skins and the pits, and then use it to dye fabric with. So it makes a really beautiful pink color. So I store them, and then when I have enough, I dye with it. But there's other ways where I also, basically every move I make in the home, and the home as being like the materialized day life for me, I try to honor this energy and this loop, this cycle of life. For example, we have a wood stove. We don't only use the wood stove for our heat to warm the home, but we use it also to dry our clothes and to warm water and to cook. So we cook in the oven of the wood stove or on top of the wood stove. We warm water for hot water bottles or for tea on the wood stove. And we don't have a cloth dryer, so we have very old school wooden clothing racks, and then we dry our clothing close to the wood stove. So in this sense, like the energy that is used for one thing is also used for many other purposes. And this principle can be applied to all segments of life and all actions. And it becomes a very nice way of, being in touch in a practical sense with what it means to live according to nature's laws. And I always try to not only have ideas about how to do stuff, but how to apply it. How can you apply these principles in very practical ways in daily life?
Yeah, and I think that these small things actually will make the biggest impact on every single level. And that's what I feel, you know, I have a little bit of like an aversion against climate activism because there is so much talk and so many big words. Okay, but what are we actually doing on the day to day? Like, how do you go about your trash? How much of your food do you throw away? Like, how much water do you use? Like, all these things are so important. And I love that you make it accessible. And I love that you also teach about that. You honor your own practice and you share that in very simple ways with people. And I believe there's really an art in that because we tend to overcomplicate things, especially when it's about pressing topics like quote unquote saving the earth and being a good human being on this planet. So I just also want to applaud you and thank you for how you bring this to the world because it makes it so accessible. And I feel that a lot of people maybe don't know where to start or don't know what to do, or they think it's already too late. And I feel that how you share things makes it very real and very compartmentalized in like small bits. So it's bite size for people to grasp and understand. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then a last topic that I want to weave in, because we started with this, you already mentioned that we see a lot of disruption in how our bodies behave, but it's actually just a response to what is happening around us. And of course, I'm working with a lot of people with menstrual cycles who have so many issues, and I feel they're only like becoming more and more and more. And how do you see everything that you shared today weave into how we as like cyclical people by default are impacted by that? And how can we, in your view, come back to that within our own bodies?
Yeah, so as I see it, is we are all in some way cyclical. So everybody living on this earth lives according to rhythm because this is how earth functions. It functions in predictable rhythms. And we are all constantly connected or, drawn into these rhythms. We align with these rhythms, and this is how it's always been. But in this modern day world, there are many ways that we can, that connection to the rhythm can be forgotten, sort of pushed to the background, which of course and cannot but affect us and everybody in a different manner. No, of course, everything is always extremely complex and everybody is unique in a sense where the story of one individual is totally different from another individual, even if they live very close together. There's no such thing as, follow this protocol and you will be realigned and everything will be fantastic, which is a way that humans love to think and function because that is, clear and it is attainable. And if I just do, step A, B, and C, and according to this or that expert, then I'll be on my way. Of course, for everyone, what re-establishes connection to rhythm is different, can mean something different. And what I have found is that there's a thing with increasing capacity. So increasing capacity to actually be able to be resilient and to adapt to certain changes. And we can, we can all increase our capacity by living in alignment with natural rhythm, for example, with sunrise, with sunset, with light, with feet on the earth. And there's so many things that, like ancestral ways that if we only reapply them, that our capacity, our buoyancy, our ability to cope with change and also to handle, modern day life, because it also is not like a boogeyman. We can also now and in the here and now live flourishing lives. But what you see is that mostly the capacity to be resilient drops, and this shows in many different like chronic complaints. And this is because we get so much information on so many ways that is totally misaligned with what Earth tells us constantly. So when we create, when we fill that cup, so to say, when we create capacity and fill that cup more and more and more by being in realignment with Earth and nature, we can move more fluidly in the day-to-day, and we can handle stuff. But if that capacity is not there, then it's very difficult for us to even come to a state of flourishment. I mean, we all have the inherent ability to be well. This is a given. I mean, in naturopathy, we call it the self-healing mechanism. Our bodies are just like a mirror of the earth as a body. The earth has an incredible ability to self-heal. Our bodies have an incredible ability to self-heal. But sometimes we are unable to tap into that self-healing because our batteries are empty, our capacity is not there. And then we come into this rational routine of looking at things in a protocol way, like I have to do this, this, and this, and then I'll get better. But first, it is about restoring that capacity, about tuning into the body, reconnecting the body to the rhythms of Earth. And when we start to reconnect and we start to gain that capacity, it becomes much easier to tap into that, that born with capability for restoration and for healing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And to close off, I wondered whether you can share some practical small baby steps that people can take if they got inspired by this conversation, like, okay, I want to focus a little bit more on living regeneratively in my own home. Like, what could be 3 small, tiny things people can do on the daily to kind of restore that connection, both with themselves and with Earth?
Yeah, so one of my favorites is actually to start growing some of your own food. And this can be done anywhere. I started growing my own food on a balcony in the city, but it can also be a windowsill, or it can be a patio garden, a small, post-temp size yard, a large backyard, whichever place is available to you. And what I love about it is because, in one sort of action, you're wrapping basically everything that we've just talked about. Because first of all, you are creating abundance with your own hands. You are remembering skills of growing food that our ancestors had. We have perhaps forgotten it a little bit, but it can be remembered. And by just starting small with, growing, for example, a couple of radishes, and whichever, produce you love most, there's this message of, first of all, I can grow my own food. It is food that is grown here and now with my own loving attention. I put my love into that seed, and that seed grows, and it grows abundantly. And I think it teaches us also observational skills that we have lost a lot just because we hurry from one point to the next, and we don't really take the time to observe nature and growth and earth. And by just that very small deed, you can start to reestablish your connection with earth, but also in a very interactive way. So you give something to earth and she gives something to you. So that is also, again, that reciprocity. You plant the seed and earth gives back produce for you to eat. So in that, very simple and humble one action, there's all these messages. And I believe that when, these messages integrate into your body and into your life, then that connection is restored, and it can be done in a very simple way. And it's actually best to do it with a very low threshold, just very simply, just start with something small, one seed, one type of produce on a very small scale, and just start to enjoy the fruits of your labor and that connection, that reconnection to that ancient skill and that ancient connection with earth. So actually, I only have one.
Yeah, I think that's a great start. And I think that one thing already takes so much attention and care from someone on so many levels that it kind of like already encompasses all the other small things that you can do, or the skill that you develop when you're caring for something from seed to plant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because usually those simple things are big, It's so paradoxical. It's like the small things are huge because they contain so much. So this one action is actually huge. I have noticed that with all of, the remembering of these ancestral skills, like also with making fire, for example, but with all of these skills, which seem very simple and very minor, that in that one action, planting that one seed or building that one fire, it looks so small and so insignificant, but there's so much contained in that one action, that one planting, that one igniting. And oftentimes we are unaware of this and we just think, oh, it's just seed in the ground, or it's just a match close to a piece of wood. And we want to do lots of things very fast and everything at the same time. And we forget that there's already this wealth of wisdom and information in that one small, tiny action. And if we can only just focus on that small thing, seemingly small thing, and actually connect with that seemingly small thing, we can just start to remember all of that wisdom that is connected to that one simple action, like sowing seeds.
Yeah, beautiful. I really hope people listening to this have like this little inspiration sparked within them to go and explore in their own locality, within their own capacity, and go and connect with everything that's around them where they live, their specific place. Is there any last droplets of wisdom that you'd like to give people before we close off?
Yeah, something that I always mention is we think we have to always, participate in the doing, but connecting with nature and with earth and with truth is mostly about observing. So about being present with whatever is. And the observation step is often just brushed to the side or, not done. And in this, I think we greatly miss the opportunity to actually and deeply connect. And that this observation part is also a lot of the times what is missing, the missing component in the ability to be connected. So if you don't even feel like, planting that seed in the earth just yet, then a step can also be to lay on the grass and observe what happens in your body when you connect your body to the earth, to that grass, and all of the magical things that you see happening in the sky above you, and the way that the wind perhaps is brushing against your hair, and the sensations that come up in your body. And just by, creating that observational, just making room for that observational skill, it creates a foundation to firmly reconnect with earth. So if the planting the seed is a little bit too far, not yet up your alley, then you can also always go back to the real foundation, which is observation and physical connection with earth, your feet on the earth, and just, sensing what happens and what's happening around you. That's an important step, which is often forgotten, the observation and the reconnection through observation and not just through doing.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that and mentioning that reminder. It actually reminds me of an important skill that we learned in anthropology when I was in uni. And it's a skill called participant observation. So you're participating, you're part of something, you're part of a bigger whole, but then at the same time, you're observing yourself whilst being part of it.
Yeah.
So I love that you mentioned that. And I know that you have a couple of workshops coming up, and I'd love for you to share where people can find you if they want to connect to you or your work or your books. I didn't even mention that yet. You have a lot of books written. Where can people best find you?
Yeah, so the best way is via my website, which is www.kyraskitchen.com. And you can follow my adventures over at Instagram, which is at Kyra's Kitchen. And all of the information about my workshops, my books, and all of the one-on-one consults, and also just the inspiration that I share freely can be found mostly there.
Super. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and share your wisdom. And I'll make sure to link all the places where people can find you in the show notes. And I just want to give you a big thank you hug for coming on here today to share.
Thanks so much, guys. It was really nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, with your friends, with your family. Post about it on social media or leave a rating or a review on all the platforms. To catch all the latest news from me, you can follow at the Planting Seeds podcast on Instagram or at Cycle Seeds on Instagram. Or you can go to my website, www.cycleseeds.com. Thank you again so much, and I'll see you next time.